Well, shalom, shalom. I'm Barbara, and I'm always short and sweet. Why is Passover a different date than Easter? The great dispute known as the Easter controversy, it began in the 2nd century when the Roman bishops and emperors wanted to join their Eastern and Western empires. And so this is history from the Jews about what happened. At the Council of Nicaea, the last thread was snapped which connected Christianity to the parent stock, and the festival of Easter had up until then been celebrated for the most part at the time of the Jewish Passover. But in its future observance, it was to be rendered altogether independent of the Jewish calendar. And this happened because Emperor Constantine stated, "For it is unbecoming beyond measure that on the holiest of festivals we should follow the customs of the Jews. Henceforth we have nothing in common with these odious people." So I'm going to let you pause the screen and read all these quotes. I have a lot of quotes here today. And so Constantine also said it would be indeed absurd if the Jews were able to boast that we are not in a position to celebrate the Passover without aid of their rules. So in other words, he condemned the holy feast days by saying that they were Jewish, and what he didn't say is that the Messiah was from the tribe of Judah, and oh yeah, he was Jewish, and he's the one that fulfilled the spring feast. The Passover feast was fulfilled with Yeshua. Passover versus Easter. The point of contention appears deceptively simple. Passover versus Easter, the issues at stake, however, were immense. The only way to determine when Passover occurs is to use the biblical lunar solar calendar. So these contentions had agitated the churches of Asia since the time of the Roman bishop Victor, who had persecuted the churches of Asia for following the 14th day heresy, as they called it. So anyone that was keeping the 14th day of the month for Passover was persecuted. So the future Easter observance was to be rendered independent of Jewish calculation. Well, how did the Jews keep Passover, and how did they calculate the timing of the Passover? First of all, we all agree that Jesus, Yeshua, was the Passover lamb, and Paul even states it in 1 Corinthians 5, 7 through 8. He says, "For Christ is our Passover lamb and has been sacrificed for us." In Yeshua, Jesus was crucified on Passover. He rested in the grave on Sabbath and was resurrected the day after the Sabbath. And you will find the Passover feast in Leviticus 23, verse 4. It says, "On the 14th day of the first month at the twilight is the Lord's Passover." So the Jews, or Hebrews, always kept a lunar calendar, and Passover was always the 14th day of the moon. The Passover-Easter controversy. So there was a lot of discussion raised about this in these churches of Asia, because they supposed that they ought to keep the 14th day of the moon for the festival of the Savior's Passover, in which day the Jews were commanded to kill the lamb. But now they were being required by Roman law to keep it differently. And there's also the Quadrasemian controversy. And they found fault with the council, reproachfully remarking that this was the first time that the ancient tradition of properly locating Passover by the moon through the compliance for Constantine had been departed from. So Emperor Constantine replaced Passover with Easter. And we know it all happened in 321 to 325 at the Council of Nicaea. But did you know that at that time Constantine changed the calendar, and he gave the sun was given the highest day of honor as the first day of the week, and the day of the sun, and Dies Saturnus, day of Saturn, was given the 7th day of the week. And this new week was cut from the cloth of their former Julian calendar with an 8-day cycling week. So now there's a 7-day week. So Constantine placed Sunday as the first day of the week and Saturday as the seventh day of the week. And this change would put Sunday for the Christians as the day of resurrection. And Pope Gregory replaced this calendar in 1582 with the Gregorian calendar, but it did not change the order of the days of a 7-day week. So Constantine joined Christianity with paganism. And prior to Constantine changing the pagan calendar to Easter, the Romans worshipped Cybele and her lover son Attis during the Spring Equinox festival. Cybele and Attis represent the Babylonian Ishtar and Nimrod. So Constantine decided to Christianize the empire. Easter was changed to represent Jesus, Yeshua. But at its roots, Easter, and that's how you pronounce Ishtar, is all about celebrating fertility and sex. So the Roman Church created the service of Easter. Victor, Bishop of Rome, proclaimed that Easter must be celebrated on the first Sunday after the full moon following the vernal equinox of their Roman calendar model. And this was done to ensure that Easter would never fall on the biblical Passover. One Catholic bishop went so far as to state, here is the quote, "It was the Catholic Church which made the law obliging us to keep Sunday holy. The Church made this law long after the Bible was written, hence said law is not in the Bible. And the Catholic Church abolished not only the Sabbath, but all the other Jewish festivals." As the years passed and the first Christians died, paganism began to corrupt the once pure faith. And so now paganism was shaking hands with Christianity. And the change of the calendar regarding Easter was attended with momentous consequences. It brought into the church the grossest corruption and the rankest superstition. So Easter is determined by the Gregorian calendar and is celebrated on the first Sunday after the first full moon occurring on or after the spring equinox. The Passover day is derived from the Hebrew calendar, which is lunar based, as it is stated in Leviticus 23. So now you know why Passover and Easter are on different dates. The Passover is biblical and the Easter is man-made. So like if this is a blessing to you, and please share it with your friends that love Yeshua so that they will know why there are two different dates, why there's Passover, why there's Easter, and which one is biblical. So Revelation 18:4 says, "Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and receive not of her plagues." And remember, I'm short and sweet, and I'll see you next time, Yah willing. Thank you for being here today.